All right. Good morning, everyone. Please confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, loud and
Hello.
clear.
Okay, so if you can hear me, maybe just type your Y in the chat. See, I think it's a good place to start. All right, interesting. Okay, so good morning again, and I trust that we are all doing great, right? This morning we are discussing the Active Directory, right? A crucial infrastructure in every enterprise's security. And somebody may be asking why, right? The Active Directory is like your, I'll say your core identity store, right? For arguably 90% of businesses worldwide rely on the Windows Active Directory. In other words, it's what holds the proverbial keys to the kingdom. People popularly call it your crown jewel, right? The crown jewel of an enterprise. So it's comes as no surprise, right, that the Active Directory is the toast of attackers. In some research work that was carried out by Mandiant, I don't know how many of us are familiar with that cybersecurity consulting firm. They said that from investigations that they've done, 90% of cyber breaches investigated had the involvement of the Active Directory, right? Either as an initial entry point or as part of privilege escalation effort, right? So let's not get it twisted. The attacker's goal is typically to gain unauthorized access to carry out their enterprise. So be it data theft, be it denial of service, be it holding the organization hostage or embarrassing the organization, right? And so securing this infrastructure and its adjacencies, say the domain controller and other solutions and applications that are authenticated by the AD, is at the core of building cyber resilience in our organization, right? This morning, our faculty is one of the industry's finest, and I know excuse me, he'll feel a bit uncomfortable me introducing him like that. Um, he told me this morning that he's a dark horse, so you can check that out, what it means, you know. His name is Akim Eleshimi. He is a security engineer with one of the tier one banks in Nigeria. He's got extensive experience in AD administration and security engineering. He's a CISSP holder. He's a certified information security manager, amongst several other certifications that he holds. It's an honor and privilege to have him share knowledge with us this morning. Our second speaker is a household name, right? Sheyi Ojedokun. He serves as the divisional head for one of the fintech unicorns in Nigeria. He recently bagged a master's in information security and digital forensics with a distinction, I must add. So the way we would run, Akim will speak to us on the AD for about, say, 45 minutes, and then take us through the lab experience. Sheyi will come in to talk us through explain some of the results from that lab and how we can use that. And then we'll have ample time for questions before we shut down. So I know that we are a mix of people who are starting out in tech or cybersecurity, people who are in mid-level and then the advanced level. As much as possible, I'm positive that our faculty will be able to break this down such that everybody can take something out of the conversation. If we are able to get one person to be triggered to go and review their Active Directory infrastructure after this conversation, we would have achieved our objective. So I'll just hand over to Akim to take us through. Good morning, and my name is Tony. I'm your host, right? Thank you. Akim?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Tony. Please confirm if you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have this opportunity to join the faculty today to present to you Active Directory Unlock. Without much ado, I think he has introduced me. My name still remains Akim Eleshin, popularly known as Dark Horse. Just like he said, I'm sure some people, one way or the other, knows that Dark Horse. Well, just like the name implies, election. So I'm a dark person. Maybe that's why people call me Dark Horse. You know, when you are dark and you have horse, people call you Dark Horse. So today, I will be sharing my screen for us to discuss on Active Directory Unlock, the strategy for cyber resilience and mitigation. Just as earlier posted, it's no doubt that if you check around the world today, over 90% of companies in the world, either one way or the other, uses Active Directory to do identity authentication authorization for people. So when it comes to auditing, people are really after these three words: identity, identification, authorization, and the likes. So it's more than essential for we in cyber tech, most especially people found themselves to be in assurance and governance, to know much about this Active Directory. And as such, today, I'm privileged to share with us some of the knowledge on Active Directory. Unfortunately, what I've been given to present, it's just Active Directory, not the full domain controller. And I'm happy that this was not extended to Azure Active Directory. So my scope of work today will be limited to Active Directory, and we'll be looking at how it begins. That is introduction to Microsoft Active Directory, the structures of Active Directory, the common authentication protocols used in Active Directory, Active Directory FISMO's role, the new security perimeter, typical credential thefts attack, then common Active Directory attack, then what are the mitigating actions we can do or how you can mitigate this scenario. A scenario attack will be shown to us. Then we'll talk about how to protect your privileged accounts. Then the hygiene practice. Then we can do, if time permits, demo on pass the hash. Then before we go into our lab. Today's lab is not a virtual lab. Anyway, we are on virtual call, but we will be demoing this thing in a physical lab where you have the opportunity to see the Active Directory itself. So let's begin. As you might all be aware, before 2020, before 2000, people found it difficult to centrally manage users. And good to enough, Microsoft introduced something called Active Directory in their Windows 2000. Basically, this is purely Microsoft proprietary services. It runs on Windows OS, and I think the latest of it runs on the latest Windows Server 2022. It serves as the backbone of identity infrastructure for, I put it at 80% of companies worldwide, because I see some shifts, drastic shifts these days, that companies are now moving away from the on-prem Active Directory into the Azure. I tell you, some years back, 10 years back, a lot of people, a lot of companies were using Active Directory. So it's widely used by organizations for its simplicity and centralized management. Because it's easy to manage, most organizations adopted its usage. And not only organization, employees, of course, also access resources and applications with a single set of credentials, which increases productivities and efficiency. We all can testify to it today. With single sign-on, you do not have much to do once you log on into a Windows environment. For some of us that uses things like Outlook or Microsoft 365, once you log on, it's not at every time you get a prompt to start logging into your application. And with the introduction of Microsoft Edge, once you log in, it just automatically sign you in. And you'll be surprised when you go to some sites, there is no prompt for username and password. This is one of the values or benefits, I would say, the Active Directory brought in. It runs on a structured environment where you organize your team in a structural way. And like I said, it's centrally managed structure that provide a single point of control over management of users, computers, and access to network resources. What do I mean by this? From a single center, an administrator can easily tell what a computer can do. It can decide to say the user on a computer only Mr. A can log on to a computer, Mr. B cannot log in. You could also decide to say Mr. A can only access computer A and not able to access computer B. So these are part of the features you see in Active Directory. Active Directory stores data as objects, such as, which most of us are aware of, such as users, computers, printers, and many other things. It integrates with other services like DNS, like DHCP, like Active Directory service, certificate services, and many other more. If I'm to start talking about all other integration, which maybe if we go into the practical, we could also talk about it. So quick one. This is basically an Active Directory structure, as you could see. Now, if you look at an organization, this is just like an organization that have two domains. So we need to understand, let's start from the understanding of the structure. What is a domain and what is a forest? What is the difference between these two? Sometimes people, I remember when I started my career, and my boss then, we always say, go and turn on that child domain. Go and turn on that forest domain. Go and turn on the root domain. And I get confused with all these terminologies. What is all this? Well, it's always like that when some people want to make us feel you need to learn. And thank God today, I can tell you at least all those terminologies are nothing, but just something I can tell you without anything. So if you look at this diagram, you can see the whole structure. Everybody within this diagram at the top level represent the forest. Where within a forest, you can have a domain. Where within a forest, you can have multiple domains. So like this particular one now, let's say an organization. Let me use Cybertech organization as a group. Cybertech organization has two different domains. Let's say the techie domain and then the cyber domain. Let me put it that way. So domain one, it's located in London, and domain two is located in Canada. Inside these single domains, inside these two domains, there are some child domains. So because domain one is located in London, they have subdomain, which is called the child domain. So they have subdomain of sales dot domain one and account dot domain one. While in the other domain located in Canada, they have another sales dot domain 2.com and account dot domain 2.com. Now, with a single trust, depending on the type of trust you have, depending on the organization strategy and structure, you could have two-way trust or a single-way trust, depending on what you want to do. But I will not want to delve into too much things because of time. I know time is of essence. I have asked if this is a training just to highlight, just to introduce people to it, because I am giving 45 minutes to present, and speaking too much on things sometimes may not give me the opportunity to go deep. So within these two domains, there's something they call trust. You could have two-way trust, you could have single-way trust. And from that means if you have two-way trust, somebody in domain one will have access to domain two, and somebody in domain two could have access to domain one. Some of us also run these kind of things in our organizations locally, where we have some organization, because PCI DSS, ISO, and the likes, we try to segment our domains and put a separate domain for our card holder data environment and separate another domain. But the same people have to manage this particular thing. So this is just a simple structure that shows you how Active Directory forest structure is. And in the forest, like I said, the topmost of them is the forest. In the structure, the topmost of them is the forest, where you have a domain. A domain is a logical grouping of computers, users, resources within a forest. Each domain has its own unique name and can have multiple child domain. While when you look at the tree is what's combined, what shares common root domain. And when you talk about organizational unit, that is where you have your containers within the domain that help organize and manage objects, like your users, like your groups, like your computers. And majorly, if you look at experts that runs organization, most times some people uses organizational unit OU to manage group policy, for example, because it's easier when you are doing group policy using OU. You can also use group, you can also use security groups and other things, depending on how conversant you have with such structure. And you have containers. Containers are just special OU that hold other OUs and every other objects. Without much ado, I just feel we should talk about Active Directory users. Active Directory, what it uses for its communication between domain and domain controller. Let me just quickly clarify. When we say domain, it's different from domain controller at this point. So domain controllers are the computer themselves. The computers, the PC, the servers that runs. So in a single domain, for example, you could have up to 20 domain controllers. So in this domain, there is need for those domains to communicate with each other. And what are the protocols they use? Apologies, I'm not the one that built this, but this is what Microsoft has designed. So they use protocols like LDAP, else, they use other protocols like NTLM, version 1, version 2. They also use something like Kerberos and the likes. We'll drill down into some of these protocols just to have an understanding of it, because at times, as an administrator, it's always good to have an understanding of what you're managing and what they are, and what are the security advantages and what are the attack vectors that comes with all those things. So I decided to put in here the common protocols that you have. The first one on the list here is the NTLM version 1. NTLM stands for Windows NT-LAN Manager. Basically, its own authentication is a challenge response authentication. And when it comes to encryption and or hashing, it uses DES. Now, most of the common attack you found in this particular protocol is that it's easy for attacker to use pass the hash. It's very common to use LDAP relay, authentication downtime, downgrade, and many other. In fact, it's one of the worst ever provided authentication protocol by Microsoft, because it was what? It is very vulnerable to a lot of attack. With brute force, attacker can easily get access into this because of what? It uses challenge response authentication. Now, having seen that, Microsoft decided to upgrade that to TLM version 2. TLM version 2 also uses the same thing called challenge and response. It also uses hashing this time around, but its own hashing has MD5 without anything called sorting and the likes. You know, when it comes to encryption and hashing and the likes, you also need to understand what other things that you need to put. So it's a one-way thing. Once I get it, I get it. So it's common attack to things like pass the hash, LLM, NR, MBT, NS poisoning, SMB relay, and pass the tickets. These are common attacks found in this. Now, the other one I also talk, or I would even like to talk more about, is the Kerberos itself, the three-dogged head solution protocol that uses ticket-based protocol. Its own is, it uses it with what they call KDC, that is the key distribution center. In his own case, it uses encryption in full, and encryption that comes with some other layers, not only on DES. In fact, it's been advanced to AES 254 with hash algorithm and SHA-1. But with it, it's still vulnerable. Because I can still tell you, attacker can still go use, even with all the old protocol, all the old security put in place for Kerberos, you still have golden ticket attack, silver ticket attack, credential stuffing, brute force, encryption downgrade, and even the domain controller shadowing. And the major protocol used by Microsoft as designed between the domain and the domain controller, it is what is known as this LDAP. Of course, the LDAP runs on port 389, while the secure LDAP runs on port 636. Now, this one makes use of some of other things, and you could see, because it is easier to use, you can make use of it with Kerberos, with your radios, with your tackers, with your open authentication and the likes. It does not use anything like encryption on hashing. It depends on all of that protocol. Yet, it's also vulnerable to things like attack, account discovery, brute force, and domain enumeration. Now, just to quickly put us through, because one of the things that a lot of people have clamored for is move away from NTLM and go to Kerberos, even though I do not believe any organization can quickly completely shut down NTLM, because one or two of your applications, old applications, excuse me, please. may still be running on the legacy app. Your legacy application may still be running on NTLM. Even without running on that, there are still some commands, there are still some things we run in our environment, most especially when you are doing SMB. Some of us call it whack whack. When you are doing whack whack, these are protocols that you run. I remember there was a time I was being asked to disable NTLM version 2 completely in our environment. And I'm like, I needed to go and research on this. So that's when I got to know that no. So how does Kerberos work? Kerberos is a very fantastic protocol that provides a secure way for users, machines, and services to provide their identity to each other over a non-secure network, such as internet or corporate intranet. So it is commonly used within the Microsoft Windows, and it helps to prevent exposures of plain text during the authentication protocol. So if you look at this number one, let's assume that you, I, Akim, want to access an application, a resource here. What do I normally do? The first thing is when I got into the application, first thing is it will ask me to prove who I am. At that point, I send a granting ticket to the domain controller. When I send a granting ticket to the domain controller checks his KDC and check whether what I have, it's registered in his database, uses NTDS for his database. And once it's confirmed that, it gives me a granting ticket with a section key. A section key is something that has a timeline that it's going to use. So with that, my system get back to it and say, I have a request ticket and an authentication, which send back to the domain controller. And the domain controller send it back to it that, okay, now you now have a ticket and a section. So that section is what is being sent to your application or your resources that will keep you alive. And it has a token, it has a timeline that you can use. So after some time, you see that an application that has been running, that ticket will expire. So this is how basically it runs. It's been proven to be more secure, but however, it's still very vulnerable to one or two attacks. So let's proceed. I hope I'm not doing bad on timing. Okay, I'm still within my time. So quickly, let me speak about some things. Unfortunately, I'm not sure all of us have managed Active Directory very well. I'm sure most of us must have in one way or the other. But it's always good when we are talking about Active Directory. We know what Active Directory roles are, because there's something they call FISMO role in Active Directory. That is flexible single master operation. Flexible single master operation. These are the roles that are critical component of an Active Directory infrastructure in a Windows environment. And they have basically 5 roles. The first one being the schema role. The schema role. This is responsible for performing updates to the directory schema. So for some of us who manages a single forest, single domain, if you check on your server, you will see a server that is running as a schema role. And for every directory, for every schema changes you make, of course, most of us don't do any changes at schema level, except for the expertise. In fact, do you have any reason to even go and do that? I doubt if most people have any reason to do that. So it's the schema master that is responsible for performing that update. Now, the domain naming master. This one is also a forest-wide role that run on a forest domain controller in most cases, and it's responsible for changes to the forest-wide domain namespace of the directory. This is the only one that can add or remove a domain from the directory. Moving forward, we have RID master. RID means relative identifier. For every user you create, for every object you have, on an AD, you have what is called unique relative identity. This guy is the one that makes it unique, because, okay, sometimes you'll be surprised. I change my password now. There's an RID that has been created. If you move my account from A to B, there's an RID. And within that RID, within that change of a period, if you have like 5 domain controllers running in your environment, how do you maintain consistencies across all these guys? These guys is what makes it very consistent to ensure that your RID does not change. That's why if you are doing sometime, if you are working on restoring your backup or anything, one of the things that is very critical to understand is this particular rule. If this rule is not functioning very well, then you may have 1 or 2 issues with your environment. Moving forward is the PDC. PDC simply means the primary domain controller. I think in most organizations, most administrators believe this guy is the most important domain controller. So I'm talking in the angle of where you have too many domain controllers. But if you have just single domain controller running in your domain, you may not need to be worried about all this. But if you have many domain controllers running in your domain, it is essential you get to know what each roles are, so that you can pay attention. And if you are having issues, you can know which particular one to look out for. So when you look at the primary domain controller, it's the primary source of authority for most of the domains. It ensures domain-wide time synchronization. Let me talk about this time synchronization for some of us that might not have known. If for any reason, there's time lag between your domain controller and the client machine for 5 minutes, your domain controller will not be able to authenticate you anymore. The next thing you will see is you get a lot of people complaining that my system have lost trust. So there is a need for an administrator to ensure that there is time synchronization, the time synchronization across their workstations and their domain controller synchronized to the highest level. For auditors, in fact, this is another very important thing. Auditor doesn't play with their time, because when it comes to correlation of logs, these are the only thing that you can never use in any court of law. You can't prove me that I did something at time A and you are bringing out the fact on another system at time B. That is void. So time synchronization is very essential. And why time synchronization on this particular domain controller is essential is that it handles password changes and lock. Imagine you change a password now. I'm running a domain controller of, let's say, 20 domain controller. I change a password. I don't know the password. I don't know the domain controller I'm changing the password on. If you type set L on your machine, you may check to see and see which particular domain controller you change your password. But when you change your password, the master that keep that password and replicate it across every other places is that guy called the PDC. Imagine if there is any problem with the PDC and you know you are running an environment with almost 25,000 or 250,000 users, and you know how many people will be changing their environment at that time. So at that point, you also need to be very consistent about the PDC. I said the managed account lockout, it provides authentication for legacy clients. And also when it comes to group policy, it applies group policy objects. And the final one is infrastructure master, which is responsible for the cross-domain objects reference as update, excuse me. Hello? Sorry, can I call you back? Please, apologies, everyone. So basically, this FISMO rule, as earlier said, it's ensure consistency and integrity of your AD, and it prevents data inconsistencies and conflict, ensuring proper domain and forest functionality, manages the schema update and extension, and provide a single point of management to critical Active Directory tasks. Moving forward, my host, please let me know if I need to speed up because of my time. Apologies.
Yeah, you're doing okay. You're doing okay.
I'm doing okay. Okay, thank you so much. So I said identity is the new security parameter. As an hacker, if you call me to come into your environment, to come and do penetration testing, all I am always looking out for is to get an identity of someone. And from getting that identity of anyone, I mean anyone, let me say anyone, the lowest staff, that's my main achievement. That once I'm able to get that, the next thing is I get to go. And as we always say, humans are the weakest link. So what most attacker does is to look out for that weakest link. In most cases, there are some other attack methodology they use, but in most times, when attacker want to attack anywhere, the most things they look out for is this weakest link. And see, look at this particular thing now. This guy, this attacker, what's going to do is going to send something to the, is going to send either a phishing, through a phishing mail, send something to the employee of your organization. And then the next thing it does is, basic aim is to steal your data and modify the documents and impersonate that person. And that is all about it. Then it disrupts your service. It disrupts the business operation. That's what it needs to do. So any one small mistake can lead to attacker control. So for organizations, I think this is where we need to start with. Never, never look down on anybody to say, these guys, they can never be hacked. Train as much as possible all your staff, because the weakest link up to the drivers are the people that have one way or the other connect to your network. And once they're able to connect, what this guy is looking out for is his target is to get into your Active Directory. And once he gets into your Active Directory, your actual Active Directory becomes another problem. So let's just move forward. So this particular slide shows us best practice of how Microsoft encourage users to put their servers and their domain controllers and their workstations. And you could see, if I want to compromise an administrative control in less than 48 hours, all this attacker will need to do is what we are going to play here. Even though when you place it according to this 3 tiers architecture, which if you follow the best practice, so my organization doesn't follow that best practice. No LAN segmentation, no segmentation, nothing. Everything run on a flat single network. Now, when you even segment it, because some of us are advanced to the level that we can say, yes, we have our domain controller in a separate trusted zone. Our servers are separated from the zones, and our workstations are not that. And we have firewall 1, firewall 2, firewall 3, firewall 4, all these in place. All investment made by management, yet what is this attacker? He knows that your organization has invested so much in you. So what is he really interested in? His own interest is just a matter of looking for that weakest link. With a phishing attack, he get that person, and what that does is that it starts his lateral movement. Imagine this person that has the lowest rights. He has not got, his target is to get into the tier 0, but it's just after, because he knows you have firewall, you have everything, he cannot go straight into your tier 0 environment. So his interest is to enter your tier 0 environment. So he has gotten those things and he has started his lateral movement, because once he has gotten through the phishing attack, somebody has divulged their username and password, their credentials has been revealed to the person. Even when he logs onto that system, it's still very useless to him. He can do nothing. But the next thing he's trying to do is to continue with a lateral movement. Within a lateral movement, there is likelihood that somebody will have been given admin rights. And you know one funny thing about most organizations? You get some people, they say, yes, our scanner cannot run without being an administrator. This scanner that you put here, this man must have admin right on that machine. See? This is a problem all the administrators face with. I'm sorry to say, if you are not facing it, right, you may be different, but this is one of the things I know I found in many areas. They will tell you, no, this printer, for you to do this, you must have this admin right. So what the attacker is looking at for now is this machine does not have admin right, but within that, it is going to start moving literally within this network, and eventually we get a system that has that admin right. So getting a system that has this admin right is what gives him encouragement, because he has now gotten, once he has admin right access, a system, an account has admin right access, it now becomes very easy for the attacker. The attacker is now looking for the SAM database on that machine, so that once he gets the SAM database on that machine, with the SAM database, he has gotten the hash value of everybody that log on to that machine. And that this is another thing we need to listen to and to understand. If for any reason you are on tier 0, you have logged on to this tier 2 with your tier 0 account, there is that cache password already on that machine. So when he gets the SAM database, he starts his movement. So the next thing he looks out for is on how to compromise your servers, because he knows your servers is the net critical thing, where you put your critical applications, everything. So he starts with getting that and start looking for a way on how to bypass everything. You will see there is firewall, it can't move. At least you open some things within the net, within the workstation to the server environment, either through port 338, port 443, or that's the secure port, or anything. There will be something that will be open. In fact, in most cases, 445 will be open, which is the SMB. So this is how the guys get access into your server environment. And when you get into your server environment, what most people do is they do password spray. Within this server environment, one of the problems I have with many administrators, many developers, is that they always put their credentials, in config files. The credentials that they use for the application, you find it in one config file, because maybe some of them have been trained that never use your default password, try and change it, because they've changed it. What they need to do now is that in the server farm, they are running on IIS, or they are running on Java, or they are running on anything. What the attacker will be looking at this server farm level is where we like be able to get the credential files of mother thing. Of course, he has gotten access into the environment. So getting access into this environment, its target is to get access into the database. So the privilege escalation will come, and you get, most times you get it through on patch server, sometimes you get it through common known credential, sometimes default credential, sometimes through the through not hiding your credential in your config file and the like. So the next thing the guy will do with his time is just for you to move ahead and get the domain admin credential. And you'll be surprised most times that despite all I have done, despite all the investment the bank has done, how are they still able to steal access into this domain credential? And let me tell you, when penetration tester or attacker comes into your environment, aside the one that has the mission to move out your money, one of their major mission is to get into your domain controller. And once they get into your domain controller with any misconfiguration, in any way, sometimes misconfiguration come at the level of server farm, where some application comes and the people will tell you that, no, this application cannot run without having domain admin rights. This application cannot run without having enterprise admin rights. This application, I keep asking this question. How can you tell me an application cannot run without a domain admin? Domain admin is meant for domain controller. Schema admin is meant for the schema level. Enterprise admin is meant for the enterprise level. What in the hell are you doing on an application? And an application will tell you that it wants to do. But you find it is a war between the security and the IT people. The people that want to deploy, they tell you that no, this application, they escalate you to everywhere. But if you are not knowledgeable enough to defend this thing, and the business will tell you that we are suffering because you are blocking them from giving them the right. So eventually, some of us fall victim of that and give those application domain admin, and that is the end of it. So this is how they get into the domain controller, and you will see that people will start complaining with all the, and at the end of the day, the security guys will be blamed despite all the investment made by the organization. So how do we need to, before we go into the mitigating attack, let me just quickly talk about some of the common attack, administrative Active Directory attack. We talk about pass the hash. Basically, this one is a simple way. Once I get the SAM database of your account, all I need to use is just to enter your, to bypass you just by sending the hash value without even using the original password. So I don't need to use password. These days now, the attackers doesn't go about getting your plain password. Once they get those SAM, and there is another one called pass the ticket. Like I was talking about the Kerberos authentication protocol. What the attacker is after is using that Kerberos. They will steal the Kerberos ticket and they will use it to pass that thing. This is another very, very worst one that is always common to domain controllers. It is called golden ticket attack. Golden ticket attack seems to be one of the worst you can ever think, because once they get a golden ticket attack, I don't think there is a need for you to start even running Etascator. That is the end of it. They've gotten attack, they've gotten the ticket, the main guy that holds your something. So golden ticket attack is a serious threat to Active Directory, as they provide attacker with unrestricted access to all parts of the domain. In essence, a golden ticket attack is a forged TGT which contains information about the user's identity and group management. The next one I would also like to speak about at this point is the DNS recognizance. This is, I think at the initial stage, I did mention about some of the features that are also wrong with that integrate with Active Directory. DNS recognizance comes in because what they do first is to do a cognizance into your environment with DNS, either from the public or from the internal network. And this is how they get something. So there are some security controls that you need to put to ensure that DNS recognizance attack is not always against you. Kerberos stealing is another thing that is common based on the Kerberos authentication.
Hello?
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 Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, please.
Good morning, good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm at leave.
Oh boy.
I'm fine. I said I'm at leave this landway, but I'm trekking back.
I don't think he's talking to us. Sorry, let me try and mute him.
Sorry, please, I've muted him. You can, I just mute your name. You can go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So we also talk about access control list. This is another very important thing that I like also to look at. Access control is something that does at many layers. We do it at firewall layer, at network layer, even at the host layer level. With you build in firewall, you can also do some level of access control. But most times, most of us are fond of doing it in a very weak way because we want to just get it very easy. So when people comes in, instead of them to tell you, in fact, most application owner doesn't even know the protocols they're running on their applications. So tell me, what do you need? They just say they need a permission from A to B on TCP, no TCP, just give us all the TCP. And some of them will come give us a full IP access. Some of them will come give us. So if you are an organization that does PCI DSS, you will see a lot of these assessors complaining so much about your access control. So because the weakness in that access control management is what the attacker will look out for, and they will use it to leverage. So these are other common attacks against the domain controller. They do password spray, like I think I've earlier said about this thing. One thing they do is once they get into your environment, they do password spray. And if you are an organization that have not implemented some controls against these kind of things, you get in very cheap. There's something they call local loop multicast name resolution, default and hard-coded credential. This is one of the things I think I spoke about when most of us don't even pay attention to. I was in one organization one day, and one of the things I did was to just use Nmap to scan, and I saw some IP, and the next thing I did was to log on to the IP, and lo and behold, all they do is admin. The administrator never cares. So this is where assurance security needs to come in. We don't just leave this thing to the administrator that manage these things as administrator. We need to work together in hand. And another one that I just don't want to talk too much is the NTDS.dit extraction. I think this is the this is the database of the Active Directory. Once anybody is able to get this one, all I need to do is to take it into my lab. and I'll be able to provision my Active Directory. You